So then please let me welcome at this point Karin Immenroth, Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Mediengruppe RTL Deutschland. Hello.
Hello.
Reese McLachlan, Director of Advanced Advertising at ITV. Hopefully I pronounced it perfectly.
I'll give you a pass there. Good afternoon.
Hello there. So as well as Alexander Knudsen, Vice President Solutions Engineering at MOB.
Good morning from California.
Hello. So, well, at MOB, who all have built offerings and will exchange different market perspectives on identity solutions. So if I am very well informed, Alex, this is your part to be the moderator for this upcoming fireside chat between Reese and Karen. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
All right.
It's a pleasure to be chatting with you guys. Appreciate it. Yeah, so it's a fascinating time for advertising identity and how the management of consumer relationships plays into the scale and effectiveness of the advertising ecosystem. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir a little bit here with you two, but as an operator on the demand side, it's clear to me that while buying platforms have been incredibly successful at offering audience-based targeting at scale for the past 10 years because of their ability to do cross-site tracking, those days are absolutely numbered. And it actually is going to be the next wave of data-driven decisioning at scale will be delivered by organizations like ITV and Median Group, who manage both ad inventory and consumer relationships. So between the NetID solution and the ITV Hub ID, both of your respective organizations have made significant strides in the identity space. Can you both, starting with Karen, talk to me a little bit about the identity solution that you've created?
Sure. Thanks for inviting me today. And for answering this question, I think we need to travel back like three years in time from now. So in 2018, the whole advertising industry was curious how GDPR, or in German DSGVO, would affect their business model and the collection of data in the advertising world. So from a legal perspective, it was already clear 3 years ago that technical solutions had to be found to meet the legal restrictions or legal regulations. But when it comes to business, translating those legal requirements into technical solutions, which are suitable for the market and meeting all the different requirements, it's easier said than it's done. And that's where the European NetID comes into place. So what is the NetID? The NetID is a strategic pillar for us, but also for other big companies in Germany for consent management and commercialization. So what is NetID doing? To explain it a little bit more to you guys, NetID is offering a technical solution for consent management, and NetID for sure is meeting all the legal requirements in the German and also in the European market at the highest stake. NetID has or is a product for B2B, but also for the B2C market. By offering a single sign-on, so an SSO, as an alternative login solution, which we already, or everyone knows it from the GAFAs, for example, the Facebook login. And furthermore, it's a stable identifier is created, which then can also be used for advertising purposes when the third-party cookie era comes to an end next year. So at Mediengruppe RTL, we are one of the founders of European NetID. We founded it's like 3.5 years ago, and we see that it was the right decision to do that, because now from next year on, it will become even more important for us.
And Corinne, how would you describe the reception to NetID so far and the organizations that have taken it on?
Can you please repeat the question, because I had a disconnection, so I couldn't hear the whole question.
You're okay. I was saying, how's the reception been for NetID across?
Well, the reception, we focused in the first years, we focused mostly on the publisher side, and there's many publishers who already implemented NetID. We implemented it in some of our sites, but we're now in the progress or to implement it even more or even more as for the next in the next time. Especially as, I mean, we expected like 3 years ago what was coming up now. So to be honest, we founded it, and then the urgency was not as big as we first thought, but now the urgency is coming up again. That's the reason why we're focusing a lot on NetID, or on the whole topic of identity solutions. So this is one of our high priorities for the next couple of months.
Brilliant. And Reese, tell me a little bit about ITV Hub ID.
So ITV is, I guess, in somewhat of an advantageous position as relates to this situation, on account of the fact that we never used cookies to build out our advertising products in the first instance. So what we are very much focused on is the continued effort to ensure that we have been driving registered users to ITV Hub, and that the registration process is couched in the appropriate consent mechanisms and has included in it the appropriate entitlements that enable us to use those identities for the building out of proprietary advertising solutions. There are two kind of key principles at the heart of that, which are couched in sovereignty. First of which is the personal sovereignty. So for the registered user, how are they ensuring that, or how are we facilitating their entitlement to protect the use of their data? And then, of course, there's publisher sovereignty. What is it that we can do to ensure that we are maximizing the utility within that data whilst maintaining control over the usage of it within the buying and purchasing workflow? I think the other part of our equation, which we're really excited about and has really been quite instrumental in unlocking huge swathes of value within our business, with our advertising customers, is our strategic relationship with InfoSum. Now, the way that relationship works is, for all intents and purposes, it's the Rosetta Stone that's enabling us to unlock real value in the joining together of first-party consent, appropriate consent-gathered data sets from both us as a publisher and with all our advertising customers that have their own first-party registered data sets. Over the course of time, this will also be the destination whereby we will be exploring initiatives that are not dissimilar to Karen's NetID proposition and creating a TV ID for the UK television industry.
Brilliant. So you kind of spoke ahead to what I was actually going to ask you about next, which I think is fascinating, because it's not just enough to construct audiences for the purposes of activation or just construct the data itself, but it's also how you activate that data and how you package it and surface it in a way that maintains that data sovereignty of your publisher assets, and yet delivers the advertising outcomes, right, that you are, delivering to your audiences. So can you tell me a little bit about how you're addressing activation of this identity-based data while managing those needs on both sides?
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right, Alex. Data without utility is just noise. It's just signals. And whilst in some instances it might be helpful from a publisher perspective to understand patterns and do some fairly gross level analytics, we've really got to be able to facilitate the activation of those data sets around, advanced advertising products and more progressive solutions for our customers if we're going to make any headway in competing more effectively with the big propositions coming out of the US technology giants. So the way that our process works is that in the first instance, we are creating a number of highly targeted segments using the information that is gathered through the appropriate consent mechanisms through the registration process for ITV Hub. We have a number of addressable segments that we can stand up relatively easy. These are both, cookie cutter stuff that we know that the market wants, things like some of the barb audiences that we can recreate in our digital environments, and then also some of the deeper, more custom segments that advertisers are also pursuing. But all through the thread that runs through all this is both the veracity of the audiences that we have. So we go through a pretty thorough cleansing process and verification process that the registered users that we have are that we have consistency with the postcodes that are attributed to the registered user. I'm sorry, I was just getting a little bit of reverb there. I will continue. Sorry, so it was about the veracity of the data sets and the registered users. I mean, we're in a world now where it's incredibly important that we are accurate in who our registered users are. There is a common English phrase that I am going to use, which is, the process for building out propositions is not dissimilar from any industry. And if you put shit in, you'll get shit out. And I think it's really important that what we put in at the very front end of our advanced advertising process and our advertising products is high quality, high caliber, verified users, registered actors on our platform. And then that enables us to build out gold standard advertising products.
Love it. Yeah, so it is right. It's about data in and out. And right now, you're both taking a little bit of a different approach, right? With you using Data Cleanroom tech for data onboarding. Corinne, can you talk to us a little bit about how you guys are onboarding data through NetID? And then I would love to pivot to measurement, right? So after data in is also data out. And what kind of measurement are you expecting to be able to provide on the NetID?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned in your intro one very important word, which for me is data sovereignty, and I think everything comes back to this. This is the center of all the discussions about identity and in all the data environment. So, and every stakeholder wants to have sovereignty, right? So the user wants to be in charge of his or her own data. The advertiser wants to have a competitive advantage. The publisher wants to offer the best insights for the audience and for the targeting purposes. The Adtech companies who want to offer the best technical solution, and also the GAFAs who want to maintain their market dominance. And this is where NetID comes up, because NetID is offering a solution which maintains data sovereignty for all the stakeholders in the process, which helps them to create powerful target groups for the advertiser. And our product is called NetID Professional product, which is it's more like a soft login. So it can be integrated in the TCF layer. So when the user enters the website, the TCF layer, including the NetID button, pops up. And at this point, the user can decide on how he or she would like to give the consent. So she can or he can either accept the cookie on the traditional way, or give the consent by clicking the green accept with NetID button. And if the user then decides to give consent via a NetID, we create the stable identifier. And the publisher, on the other hand, can use the identifier for targeting purposes. So as you can see, it's a quite big solution. And you also asked me about measurement, and I also do believe that measurement is getting even more important, because we have, by implementing NetID as ID solution, we also can collect a lot of data, which helps us also to show on how, for example, in the advertising environment, campaigns worked, or campaigns even did not deliver what we expected. So as the solution is is as big. We have all the possibilities to report also, the effectiveness of an advertising campaign.
Brilliant. Reese, are you able to chime in? Can I hear a little bit about how the clean room tech enables not just data onboarding, but also what type of measurement you're considering with this solution?
It's really about measuring what matters. And going back to my point earlier around data without utility is noise. It's just, it's an abundance of signals. What we're really focused on at the moment is ensuring that we're able to measure what matters, and that's media performance for us as a publisher, and it's business outcomes for our advertisers. So clearly, given that we are primarily building out our analytics set predicated on those registered users that we have, we inevitably need to augment that or complement that with data and analytics propositions from third parties. So again, the clean room proposition is incredibly helpful in ensuring that we are able to, where appropriate, match up signals from a variety of parties in a way that is compliant with GDPR law and ensures that we are continuing to respect that sovereignty proposition, which I discussed earlier around the personal sovereignty of folk who are registering up for the hub. But the net, and at risk of repeating myself, the net is ensuring that we're not just doing gross measurement, which I think has held television back for some period of time. And by gross measurement, I mean, the size of things or the volume of things. And by that, the consumption of content and whether or not we're driving just media metrics. Are we getting the right reach numbers? Have we have the right frequency numbers? Are the impression counts right? They're all important. They're all hygiene. They're table stakes. But increasingly what we need to be doing and what we are pivoting towards being very much focused on is ensuring that we've got a full analytics suite that is powered by verified, highly valued data sets that enable us to have deep analytical insights into what's driving business outcomes for our customers and what's driving platform performance and content performance for us as a publisher.
And what kind of advice would you, if there are people listening in that are hearing this story about how you're partnering with this type of clean room tech? A lot of people would be wondering, how do I get started? Like, what advice would you have for people?
I would hope that most of the folk on the call today are either familiar with the propositions. It's InfoSum's not the only game in town here. It's clearly the one that we've chosen to partner with, and that they will already have work streams or strategies in this space. I think you've got to go back to what your business need is, or what part of the market you're looking to solve for. Not everything requires a clean room solution. But we've determined, because you've got to understand, Alex, that we're also a public service broadcaster. So we have a set of obligations to our viewers, to our registered users, which is somewhat more strict and onerous than most commercial organizations would have. So we go the extra mile to ensure that we're putting in place the provisions for data security, data protection, control the rights, etc., that I said a lot of commercial organizations wouldn't necessarily have to address. So there's I would imagine that, like I said, everybody on this call has a fairly good understanding of what their critical business need is in this space. And in addition to which, I'm happy to field calls or for folk to directly contact me after the session to discuss why it is that we've chosen to explore this particular path and the partner that we've decided to work with.
Awesome. All right, so Karen, I've got one last question here. So we talk a lot about win-win scenarios between buyers and sellers in this evolving landscape, and it appears to me that closer partnership, right, is what's going to help us all navigate this identity question into the future. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about just an example of a deployment or a partnership with between a buyer and a seller where you guys have really partnered around data that's helped them, deliver outcomes.
Yes, sure. So from my perspective, partnering in data in Germany is key to be successful in future. And NetID or European NetID I think it's a a great example on how we partner with other companies. I mean, it's ProSiebenSat.1, which is our direct competitor, for example, but it's also 1&1, which is a big internet provider. So it's partnering because we have the same goal, building an identity solution. But this is just one example. We do have a couple of other strategic partnerships, for example, DForce, which is also a partnership with ProSiebenSat.1, or we do have a partnership with Deutsche Telekom, for example. So I think, and probably we will see a couple of more partnership situations with other companies in the next years, and also alliances. I mean, you know that we built the Ad Alliance. I'm responsible for the Data Alliance, which is also a partnership with other companies to join the forces in data, and to join the forces to bring together everything we have in order to compete against our GAFA colleagues from the US.
Brilliant. Reece, same question to you. Can you share an example of a specific advertiser that you guys are working with around data that you're doing some interesting stuff with?
Yeah, we're working with we have some pretty substantial and significant pilots live with a food delivery service, a high street chemist, a telco, a major national supermarket, all of whom are using the InfoSum solution to create custom segments, audiences, which we are porting into Activating and Planet V. I guess the one thing of note I should call out is that in creating the activation opportunity with our data sets, we are not allowing them to be ported any further other than our own environment. So InfoSum enables us to do the match, creates the utility, creates the custom audience segment in a secure and compliant way, but it's being pushed back into only our ecosystem, only our platform. So we're being incredibly forthright in ensuring we're putting up some pretty strict boundaries around any further utilization of our unique data set outside our own ecosystem. And I would encourage a lot of the other broadcasters and premium publishers on this call to think long and hard about what security and what provisions they have in place to ensure that core raw ingredient, the materials upon which we build those really progressive advertising products, is able to be secured and maintained exclusively within your particular propositions. I think once we get approached all the time, because we've got 32 million registered users, so there's a lot of folk really interested in building up audience graphs, device graphs off the back of our data sets. We're not in the business of looking to build third-party propositions. We have a big commercial proposition that's already under considerable threat from the GAFAs, and what we want to do is utilize the primary, unique, high-value propositions that we have that exist within our business and maintain them within the confines of the operation that we have. And like I said, I would encourage other broadcasters to think along similar lines.
That's great. No, this has been a very fascinating little conversation with kind of two different tacks currently at how you guys are addressing the question. So a very lively discussion. I'm wondering, do we have any questions from the crowd that we need to answer?
That is, Alex, that's a very good question. I don't know if you can hear me right now, but that's a very good question. Oh, okay, that's perfect. So what we're going to do is they're about to tell me real soon if we do have some questions from outside. But what I do know is that I think that we have little technical challenges with our streaming platform, but the whole team in the back is working on it, to fix it real soon, so we can get back from that point. The viewers couldn't continue to listen and watch us from that moment of breakdown. We'll continue from that point, but we are still going on in our streaming. So all of us, we don't we don't recognize that breakdown, but let me tell you real soon if we do have some questions. But I would like to continue with you three guys. So if three people, if you do have questions from your side, Alex, you can continue with your conversation. But from
Yeah,
right
sure.
now, we do not
I've got
have
one.
questions.
Yeah, no problem. So another hot topic in the industry is around the use of cohorts, right? And the ability to aggregate data up for the purposes of decisioning. I know, Reese, you have some opinions here. So I'd love to start with you so you could share your take here on the use of advertising cohorts.
I'm totally fine with cohorts. I think they're a well established and well utilized mechanism that's been used, pre-digital. I think we need to be a bit more circumspect as an industry in thinking about the extent to which proxy personally identifying information is that important to what we're trying to achieve. I run advanced advertising for the biggest broadcaster in the UK, yet I've been cynical for some period of time around the perceived drive to have this intimate insight on a one-to-one basis with a viewer or with a consumer. I find that morally invasive and somewhat challenging to square. Cohorts and the building up of clusters and lookalikes and modeled segments is more than sufficient to drive advertising outcomes in our experience. I think that we are in danger. We have been in danger of finding ourselves developing solutions that have been driving towards the unnecessary point of intervention from regulators, because there have been certain spokespeople or advocates that have been all about the one-to-one addressable experience. One to a couple, one to a group, one to a cohort, one to a cluster is more than sufficient to drive advertising outcomes. And the mantra that we have within ITV is, what is the least amount of data that we need to do the job most effectively? Right? And that's not PII, that's not cookie based, that's not that's not the addressable individual identifier that is necessary to do that.
Yeah. Context as a proxy for intent is as old as the advertising industry, right? And so there's been this obsession with lookalike targeting.
Yeah, I'm not.
I mean, just content, even content delineators as an ability to generate a cohort, I guess, is really what I'm talking about.
But I can create an audience of folk who bought a car, an automobile in the last 3 years. I've got a group. I can build a group of those folk, and I can put them. I can cluster them as an aggregate segment and target those. I don't need to know, with any great degree of statistical, multiple decimal points who those individuals are. It's a step too far, and like I said, it would if we were to continue along that path, I think we would be finding ourselves with the unwelcome scrutiny of the regulators in our respective markets, and that doesn't help anybody. That's not to say I'm an advocate of what Google's trying to do with FLoC. I mean, I can see it being leveraged, and I can see them already starting to put some noise in the market about leveraging it to their own ends. That there is. Let's be very clear. The way in which they've been presenting it, and I see a little bit of this with Apple now as well. That this isn't a charitable, altruistic, in the best interest of the user approach. More, it's about enhancing their own walled garden propositions. So theoretically or academically, I'm all good with FLoCs, with clusters, with aggregate segments. I'm not necessarily here to advocate or be the cheerleader for the way in which those two businesses and leverage it to drive their own commercial propositions.
Karen, I'd love to get your take on this as well.
Unfortunately, can you hear me? Because I hear everything interrupted, so I could follow the cohort discussion, and I would totally agree. So I think cohorts, lookalikes, and so on, totally fine on a one-to-one communication. I also would be, let's say, or I would have more problems, let's say it like that. But everything which is happening on cohorts, from my perspective, totally fine. Unfortunately, what you discussed after that, I couldn't hear it because my line is also interrupted all the time. I'm so sorry.
No problem. No, it's all good. I think we're heading back to the studio now.
right. So thank you very much to all of you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Riz. And thank you, Alex, for your very, very interesting information and conversation at this point.